the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. And let me just share my screen so that we have some PowerPoint that might support us as we go along. It's really great to be here, and I'm so looking forward to being in Montreal again in April. I haven't been there for several years, and so I'm looking forward to that a lot, and to meeting many of you. And a few of your names I recognize as people who signed up for my mailing list, so thank you so much for that. I appreciate that a lot. So today we're here to talk about transformational presence and conscious leadership in a rapidly changing world. I think few of us would argue that things are moving really fast these days. And so looking at this, exploring this, it's also the basic topic we'll be working with in Montreal, both in my keynote lecture and then in the full day workshop the following day. And because our work when we're in person is completely interactive and experiential, let's just step right into an exercise together right now and begin to explore from that, in that way of working together. And so consider this question: what opportunity is available to you or to your organization if you're working for a company, or maybe even for your business? What opportunity is available to you or to your organization now? Just sit in the quiet with that question for a moment. And my invitation to you is, let it show itself to you. There's nothing to figure out. Just be with the question and what shows up. What opportunity is available to you or to your organization now? And then we move to a second question. Listen, sense, and feel to that opportunity, and let the opportunity speak to you. So who's that opportunity asking you to be right now? So what does that question actually mean? It means, how's it asking you to show up? What part of you is it asking to bring forward? Maybe it's a particular skill or competence that you have, or an aspect of your being. Maybe it's asking you to be courageous, or it's asking you to be creative or playful or honest, or it's asking you to show up in a particular way. Or maybe it's asking you to play a particular role. So who is that opportunity asking you to be? Listen, sense, feel. Let the opportunity tell you. It's nothing to figure out. Let it show you. And then one more question, again, staying with the opportunity itself, listening, sensing, feeling. What is that opportunity asking you to do? Now, we're not talking about a big 10-step plan. We're actually just talking about the next step. What does it show you or ask you for as a next step? Let the opportunity tell you or show you. So let's just pause here from the PowerPoint for a moment. And what happens when you ask those three questions? Who can speak about that? Just share with us what you discover. What happens when you ask those three questions in that order? Just take yourself off of mute and speak freely, because I can't see all of you. So just speak out.
Hi, Alan. This is Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
What happened for me is a wonderful focusing and closing in, a calming of thoughts and energy. It felt really wonderful to be in that focus and reflection and listening. I appreciated your invitation to listen.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Who else?
Alan?
Yes.
So for me, it was just words, and I got teaching, learning, serving for the first question. How does it feel, or how should I show up, is creative flow and take your time.
Yes.
And what is it asking me to do as a next step is step out there, don't be afraid, they're waiting for you. So yeah, and like the previous person said, if we just give ourselves a few moments to listen, something does come that
Couple more people. What happens when you ask those three questions? It's not even so much about the answers that come, but those three questions. What is the gift of just those three questions?
Hi, this is Gabriel.
Yes.
For me, it's a feeling. It started off as an intellectual process, but it actually went down to the heart, and it just went from top to the heart.
Yeah, great. I love how you say that. So thank you. Started out as an intellectual process and then dropped right on down to the heart. Yes, exactly. Who else? Michelle, I saw that something popped into the chat from you. Can you just say it out loud?
I was just making a note of what Suzanne said that I really liked. If we give ourselves a moment to listen, answers do come that I feel I can trust.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, when I'm working in an organization, this is right at the top of the very first day. This is exactly what we do. Just these three questions, right to the organization, and they're all moving around and getting them interacting with each other. But I work a lot with the global level leadership of IKEA, and the very first time I was with IKEA, and then this has happened in every single time since then, is the response is, "Oh my gosh, if you just stop and breathe and take a step back, there's so much information available. It's all there." And that is so much a huge piece of what is transformational presence about. It is about being in a space where we can step back, we can observe, we can listen, we can sense, we can feel, and see what is there for us as we go along. Let me just take us back to the PowerPoint here now. And so we're living in this time that's being called a VUCA world. Probably most of you are aware of that term. And I bring it in now, not so much because the term itself is so important, because it's becoming a little bit overused, at least in some places that I work. But to say, what does that actually really mean? Well, it's an acronym for those four words: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And we certainly are living in volatile and uncertain times. Things are happening so quickly, and I don't know, I can't speak so much for what's happening in Canada these days, but your southern neighbor, things are certainly volatile and uncertain down here in the US right now. But the bigger words that come in for me here are complex and ambiguous. And complex that's a very important thing for us to pay attention to in today's world, comparing a complex situation with a complicated situation. And this is actually in our workshop, the full day workshop on the 10th. We'll be doing a huge exercise by mapping things out on the floor on the first day, in the morning of the first day, about this distinction between complicated and complex. In essence, the distinction is that when something is complicated, it is linear. You can find the cause and effect sequence. You can see an order of how things unfolded. You can look back and see, oh yeah, that's how this happened, and you can make a plan and implement that plan, and you can be fairly certain that probably you're gonna get the result that you're going after. When we're working in complexity, on the other hand, There is nothing linear about that. The pieces are all moving constantly. It's very challenging to see often how one thing connects to another. It's very challenging to know what is happening in any particular moment, and there are many, many layers to what's going on. Many of those layers we're not even aware of yet. We just know that somehow they're there. And so working in complexity demands an entirely different set of skills than working in complicated, in linear world. When we're working in this circular and complex world, it's a whole different set of skills. And then ambiguous goes along with that, because the word ambiguous simply means we can't define it. We don't know exactly what it is. Even though I'm looking at it, perhaps I can't name it. I don't know what that is. This is the world that we're living in right now. This is the world that our leadership is being asked to serve right now. This VUCA world, this especially complex and ambiguous world. I've been writing a lot in the last couple of years about this time as what I call the Great Breaking Open. A lot of people would say that things are falling apart, everything is breaking down, nothing is working anymore. And to some degree, yes, you could say that's true. And on the other hand, I prefer to look at what's happening in the world right now as that it's breaking open. That it's as if as it breaks open, we're able to see right to the core of what's going on. And then we can work from the inside out, because transformation is an inside out process. It starts from the core. I recently came across this quote from Adrienne Marie Brown, who's an American author and women's rights activist and feminist, and I just love this quote because it's so what the Great Breaking Open is. Things are not getting worse, they're getting uncovered. We must hold each other tight and continue to pull back the veil. That's so much about what's going on right now. When I first started writing about the Great Breaking Open in my own meditation, I kept hearing every day, everything will be revealed. Those words, everything will be revealed. Well, step by step, as we keep pulling back the veil, things are being revealed. And it's interesting to look at that from that perspective of it's not getting worse. It's actually been there for a long time. It's just that we haven't been willing to look at what's really going on and to start to address it and to work with it. So things are getting uncovered. So how do we respond as leaders and coaches to this? How do we help those that we serve navigate in this VUCA world? And another piece about the VUCA world is when we just put things in a box and say, oh yeah, well, it's just this VUCA world that we're in, that doesn't serve us very much. It's recognizing that this idea of VUCA and the Great Breaking Open is not a one-time thing, or it's not a box to put something in or a silo, but rather it's a state of being and it's a flow. We are in this flow of a VUCA world. We're in a flow of breaking open, and things keep breaking open one after another, after another, after another. And so how do we respond to that? Well, there is this conscious leadership movement that is emerging in the world, and I feel like it's also still trying to find out what it is, and even what does conscious leadership mean? And so some things here to maybe start to give some definition to that. It's a term like conscious leadership. We start to throw around the term and assume that everybody understands what we mean. I mean, that word conscious, don't we all know what that is? And when in fact, what does it actually mean? We all have our own interpretations of what that is. For me, conscious leadership means we are coming to the table with a whole new set of skills and tools, as well as a broader capacity for awareness and perception. These times are requiring us to stretch way beyond the familiar, the knowledge-based, the figure-it-out approaches that we've been taught. And this is an enormous paradigm shift for people to make, to be willing to step over into an intuitive space as well as an intellectual space, and acknowledge that is very real. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. It's in the simplest terms here, though, just to say that conscious leadership, the conscious part, for me, is the full conscious awareness of both the intellectual mind and the intuitive mind. And we'll speak about that a little bit more when we talk about whole mind thinking in a little bit. Conscious leadership is also a capacity for being fully present with the reality of what's happening in the moment, and being able to feel and sense and listen to that energy and discover what's needed next. That discover is a really important word. It's not about analyzing it. It's about listening, sensing, feeling. The information is there just as it was for you with those first 3 questions. And it's also about being willing to be with what's happening in the moment without placing a judgment on it, without naming it good, bad, right, wrong. It's just what's here. It's just what's in front of us right now. And therefore, it's our next co-creative partner. Where are we going? What are we going to do next? It's about being comfortable, conscious leadership, being comfortable with not knowing the answers, maybe not even knowing the questions. And being willing to, not only as the leader, but as we look to leaders, to give them the space to not know the answers, to give them the permission to not have the answers. I kind of have this fantasy about a company who's going to hire a new CEO, and they say, you know, we're in the final interview process and they're about to offer someone the job and saying, so here's the deal. We'll pay you $5 million a year to have all the answers. However, we'll actually pay you $50 million a year to not have any answers. To me, this is a huge space that is waiting for us to step into as a society, into a space of where nobody knows the answers with where we are right now. Nobody knows. We all can gather some pieces of information. We can all tap into a different sense or different aspects of perhaps next steps and what's calling out to us and what wants to happen next as we go. And so it's that awareness, that willingness to be in that space ourselves, as well as to allow our leaders, those who we look to as leaders, to be in that space. It's about being curious and imaginative and willing to explore without knowing what we're going to find, and trusting that clues will appear to show us the way forward. In the Transformational Presence work, we actually work with 4 kind of modern day archetypes. I call them ways of looking at these qualities that we need within us to be able to do our work in the most effective way. Those qualities are the seer, one who sees or actually perceives beyond the ordinary, beyond what most people do, and recognizes that there are many layers and is able to peer down through those layers, recognizing that the future or the whatever it is that wants to happen next is somewhere within the picture as I look down into the layers of what's going on. So there's the seer, and then the explorer, one who's willing to go places they haven't been before, and one who's willing to, just as this bullet point says, to go explore without knowing what we're going to find. And trusting, using her seer skills to recognize the clues that are appearing. There are messages everywhere if we'll just pay attention. The third of those archetypes is the co-creator, who recognizes that we are constantly co-creating our reality all the time, whether we're conscious of that or not. The more conscious we become of it and are willing to partner with, to co-create with everything that's around us. Co-creation is not just about working with other people. It's also about working with the potential that's emerging. What is it that's showing up here? So all this is held within this idea of curious and imaginative. Oh yes, the 4th archetype is the ambassador. The ambassador is the one who builds bridges. And I think, especially if we talk about that in conscious leadership, it's building bridges of awareness. As if we are the ambassadors to a greater consciousness, ambassadors to a greater awareness. All of this comes under this curious and imaginative place. And conscious leaders need to be at home in our own skin. What does that mean? Really comfortable with who we are, really aware of what we're very good at and owning that and stepping into it, and really aware of what we're not so good at or what we need to learn, or our own blind spots, our own, all that stuff, at home in our own skin and really knowing who we are. And conscious leaders create environments or cultures where it's safe to experiment, safe to admit failure, safe for everyone to bring their full selves to the table. You know, it's creating a space in which people can come in the door with wherever they are and can say whatever they need to say. And creating a space where it's safe to have our own relationships with what's going on, and to find our way with it and to support one another with that. And finally, conscious leaders understand that everything is connected to everything else. And this is actually the fundamental worldview that shapes every choice we make, every decision we make, at the most foundational level. That worldview being of, do you believe that everything is connected or that everything is separate? And that fundamental way of looking in the world shapes every other choice and decision that we make. Conscious leadership demands that we come into this awareness that everything is connected in some way. Years ago, there was that show in Broadway, 6 Degrees of Separation. I wrote an article about this whole thing, this fundamental worldview, not so long ago, and talked about that 6 degrees of separation, that within 6 degrees, everything is connected to everything else. The more we can play in that matrix and look for those connections, the more amazing things can happen. So what is transformational presence then? How does that fit into all this? And there are those people who feel like the transformational presence is a movement, but I don't actually. For me, transformational presence is in service of this much larger movement of conscious leadership. However, we bring a very specific contribution to that movement, and that is the fundamental tools and skills and approaches that can allow us to be in all that we've just talked about, all those bullet points. We offer you such clear and simple yet incredibly powerful and profound approaches and ways of working, ways of asking questions, ways of exercises of engaging the intuitive mind. And so let's just talk about this word, transformational presence. The word presence, I define that simply as how you show up. And what do people experience when they're with you? And there's 2 levels of that. It's one, we talk a lot these days about being fully present in the moment, but there's not yet quite enough conversation about what is the presence that you bring to this moment. And that's a really important thing for us to be exploring here. Then that word transformation, it's being used all over the place now, which means it's easy for us to lose sense of what does that word really mean. It comes out of the Latin root transforma, which literally means change across form. Transformation happens, I say it's an inside job. It happens from the inside out. That it comes back to the great breaking open, and actually the gift that we get from the great breaking open is that in fact it's all breaking open and we get to cut right through. We're being shown right through to the core, or at least closer and closer to the core, and we start working there at the center. And it's just like when you drop that pebble in the pond and the rings go out. We start from the center and work out from there. Change is an outside-in process. A transformation is an inside-out process. So what is transformational presence? It's about creating the optimal culture for the transformation to happen, for the greatest potential to emerge, for the breakthroughs to happen. I think about transformational presence in the simplest terms as like tending a garden. If any of you are gardeners, you know that when you plant a seed, there's nothing you can do to make that seed grow. But there are lots of things you can do to encourage that seed to grow. You can plant it in rich soil. You make sure it gets the right amount of water and the right amount of light. Maybe you fertilize it. You pull the weeds to give it space to breathe. Our job, conscious leadership, it's really about tending the garden. That's our job, is to tend the garden. So how do we do that? And I'm just being conscious of the time here. I want to get to a little more experiential stuff. So I'll talk about this and then we'll move into something else. Experiential, whole mind thinking. It's really, it's much more than just left and right brain together. But whole mind thinking, I created that term actually when I first started working with IKEA. I thought I need something besides intuitive thinking. And I wanted to find another term, and that worked for them. When we talk about whole mind thinking, we're talking about the partnership of intellect and intuition, recognizing that the intellectual mind, more centered in the head, and the intuitive mind centered in the heart. And some of you may know the Institute of Heart Math. In California, if you don't know it, go to heartmath.org and check it out, because they're doing incredible scientific research on intuitive thinking, on the intelligence of the heart, on the coherence, the alignment between the intellect and the heart. And one of the things that they've discovered in their research is that the electromagnetic field of the heart energy center, which is the center of the intuitive mind, the electromagnetic field of the heart center is 5,000 times bigger than the electromagnetic field of the intellect. Well, what that says to me is that coming from the heart center, we have access to a field of information that is 5,000 times bigger than the field of information we can access only through the intellect. So we've all been taught, or most of us at least, to start with the intellect, and maybe we engage the heart a little bit here and there to kind of soften the edges a little bit. It's actually, we need to go the other way around. It's starting with the heart awareness, to recognize we need both. The heart is really good at stretching its awareness out into the quantum field, into the energy field of a situation, whatever is going on. So stretching out, reaching out very far into that field and gathering information and bringing it back in. However, the heart is not very good at organizing that information. And that's what the intellect is very good at. The intellect takes that information that the heart has gathered and organizes it, puts it into that filing system, that incredible filing system, that something you haven't thought about for 5 years, and suddenly you need that piece of information and it's right there. That's what the intellect can do for you. The intellect can organize it all, but the intellect is not very good. It's very limited in how far it can reach out into the energy field of the situation. So whole mind thinking is starting with the heart and reaching way out, gathering information, just like we did with those 3 questions. And then using the intellect to organize that, to put that into some form that we can start to use that in our daily application. Whole being awareness just takes it beyond the heart and the mind to the whole body, recognizing that there's this incredible human energy technology that for me is actually, that's the next big frontier for us as we are more and more exploring this human awareness technology and the incredible intelligence within our bodies and all the information that our body has to offer us. Transformational presence is so much about this partnership between presence and action, between the intuitive mind and the intellectual mind. Let's skip on through here so that we can get into something a little more I do want to talk about this. There's a big shift if we move from a more transactional kind of coaching and leadership that's all about just getting the job done, which I don't mean to say that that's not a good thing, because sometimes we just need to get the job done. But there's much more available to us now. Transactional work works fine in a complicated situation, in a linear world, but we're not living in a linear world anymore. And so we come into transformational work where in transactional work, we're looking for the result. That's our initial intention, is just to get the result. It's about problem solving, getting there as quickly as we can. In transformational work, it's not about getting a result immediately. It's first about stepping back to take in the big picture. What's really going on here? And what wants to happen? What's it asking us for? What's the opportunity here? What is it that's available to us? And then from there, asking, it's our 3 questions. So what needs to shift within our awareness, or within our beliefs, or within our ways of doing things, our practices, in order to start moving towards that opportunity, the thing that wants to happen? And then the 3rd question, then what is the step that we can take now to begin moving in that direction? The key is here that when we are working in a problem-solving approach, in a transactional approach, in a way, especially in today's world, we're actually going backwards because we're just trying to fix it and make it like it was before, back to when we thought maybe it was working. We say in Transformational Presence, a problem is not something to be solved. It's a message to be listened to. A problem is not something to be solved. It's a message to be listened to. And so when we move to the transformational approach, it's about starting from that big picture. It's about stepping back and listening first and sensing what's here and taking those next steps. So all this takes us to leadership capacities. In coaching, many of you were introducing yourselves as coaches, and one of the things that we often say in coaches is that the client has the answers, and we expect that it's just we could go inside and find the answer and get that done. And we talk about competencies as coaches and their competencies as leaders and as managers. If we're going into transformational work and we go into conscious leadership, we have to go way beyond skills and tools and competencies now into capacities. The skills and tools and competencies help us to stretch our capacities. But in conscious leadership, transformational leadership, what we're really talking about is our capacities for awareness on multiple levels, awareness of what's obvious as well as what's hidden, of what's happening around us as well as what's happening within us, and awareness of our presence. How are people experiencing our presence in this moment? We need to have an enormous capacity of understanding of how life works as energy in motion. The ancient wisdom traditions told us that life is energy in motion. Now quantum physics, the quantum sciences show us the same thing. We need to understand what that means. That's a huge part of our work in transformational presence, is helping people to understand how to work with energy and move things much more quickly. Our capacities for holding complexity and cutting to the core or the essence of what's going on. You see this word transformation. I kind of skipped over that, but if we move from transformation to from transactional to transformational, and then I started to feel like, yes, but now that's a duality. What's beyond that? And then this word transformation came to me, which is transformation in action. It is that ability to sense a new piece of information, a new awareness, a new understanding, and immediately put that into practice, immediately put that into motion. There's no gap between awareness or understanding or discovery and action. So our capacity for holding complexity and cutting to the core, the essence, and then working from the inside out. It's our capacity for discovery and creativity and innovation. Again, it's that whole mind thinking and whole being awareness, dancing in the moment with what's going on. And let it be, we just get on the wave and ride it and see where it's going to take us. Some of you are seeing my boy Toby here, who's really wanting more and more attention. Our capacities for supporting others in whatever is happening without emotional entanglement. This is an enormous piece. In the heart math work, they also talk about this high heart energy center as opposed to the low heart energy center. We won't go into that now, but you might want to check out that aspect of their work as well. Or there's a video on my website, short little exercise, working with the energy of the high heart and the low heart. That high heart, in essence, I think of it as the compassionate observer, the ability to be so fully engaged with everything that's going on without getting entangled in what's going on. And our capacity for meeting whatever comes from a place of clarity and trust and confidence. This does not mean that we have the answers. It does not mean that we know what to do next. It means that we have learned to trust. We have an enormous capacity for trusting that if we pay attention, there are signals everywhere. We will find our way. So let's play with this a little bit. In the end, so much about this work is, do you talk to life or do you let life talk to you? We're very conditioned to talk to life, to talk to our relationships, to talk to our circumstances and situations and tell them what we want them to be, to try to make something happen. So let's play with this a little bit on your own. Bring to your awareness a challenge or a project that you're working on right now. Obviously, you're not going to have to talk about it to anybody else. So It can be anything you want to work with. A project or a challenge you've got going on. And then be honest with yourself. Have you been talking to it? Have you been trying to make something happen there or trying to figure something out? Or have you been listening to it, letting it talk to you? And it's okay, whatever you find out. But if you have been talking to it, turn that around. Just as we started with that first question at the beginning of our session, what's the opportunity available to you right now? Well, ask this situation, ask your challenge, ask your project to talk to you. What does it want you to know right now? Maybe it's about a next step. Maybe it's a deeper understanding about something that's going on. It's trying to show you something right now. What is that? And then take a deep breath and let go of that project or challenge and bring to your awareness a relationship that's important to you. A relationship that's important to you. And be honest with yourself. We're not talking about, when we talk about the relationship, I'm not talking about the other person or the other people. I'm talking about the space in between you and the other person. That's the relationship space. That's the most powerful place for us to work. So in that relationship space, have you been talking to it? Have you been telling the relationship what you want it to be? Or have you stopped to listen to the relationship, to let it talk to you, not the other person, the relationship itself? And if you've been talking to it, then just step back, listen, sense, feel. What does that relationship want you to know right now? What's it trying to show you? So let's open this up again. I'll stop to share just for a moment. We don't need the story of what's going on. Some of those things that you just worked on may be very personal, but what's different between when you talk to it and when it talks to you? Who can share something?
I will. I'm Kim.
Yes, thank you.
I find that when I talk to life, I'm forcing it. And when I force it, I immediately get out of that heart centering of listening. And it's a conscious thing that you're always trying to flip to. So yeah, I definitely was like, okay, yeah, that's definitely totally makes sense that sometimes I just need to listen and not always force. And not
Yes.
force.
And it's Kim, thank you so much for that. And we need to be gentle and compassionate with ourselves about that, because the air that we breathe says, make it happen.
Totally.
And so the conditioning is so strong for that. So it's a constant reminder. You know, I'm a pretty aware guy, and at least once a day, something happens that I have to say, Alan, just be quiet, listen, step back. Yeah, thank you for that. Somebody else.
I can go, Nancy speaking.
Yes, thank you.
I feel that it unfolds possibilities I would never think of.
Yes.
So
yes.
it opens the world, actually.
Yes. Yes.
Mm.
It simply is. So many of the tools that we work with in Transformational Presence, because they are all intuitively based, although we don't talk about that much, it's the structure of the tool itself, or the way of asking a question. The intellect kind of doesn't know what to do with that question. It makes us access a bigger part of our awareness.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we're doing here. with these questions, with those first 3 questions that we did at the top of the session, with all the tools and the exercises that we work with in Transformational Presence. It simply is creating very simple structures that take us beyond the intellect into the intuitive mind. The intellect is still there. The intellect will organize everything that we discover, but it's taking us to the bigger awareness to see what's there. Let me just come back then to take us into another exercise to wrap us up today. And everything that we do in Transformational Presence then comes down to, it's just built on 3 questions. The 3 questions that we started with. We asked that first question, what wants to happen, in the form of what's the opportunity available. But other variations on that first question might be, what's the breakthrough that's trying to happen? Or what is the shift that's trying to happen? Or what's trying to get our attention right now? What's the message that's trying to come through? What is the potential that is just under the surface waiting to unfold? Those are all variations on that first question. And then the second question, so who's that asking us to be? How's it asking us to show up? What's the role it's asking us to play? What does that mean there? And the more we're going straight to the being, to the presence first, the more you become very clear about how you're being asked to show up, the next action is obvious. There's hardly anything to focus on when we get to question number 3. So what's it asking me to do? Because as soon as I know exactly how I need to show up, the next step, and remember, we're only talking about the next step. We're not talking about the next 10 steps, just the next step. Here's my next step to do. So the model that we're working with is opportunity to presence to action. What wants to happen? How's it asking me to show up? What is the step we're going to take? And just being aware of working in that order all the time. So we'll close today with this tool that I created a few years ago called the Deep Simple. And I created this tool because I was on a call like this one, in a dialogue with a colleague of mine talking about transformational presence and things applying to leadership and so forth. I don't remember what the topic of the day was, but he and I talked for about 20 minutes or a half an hour, and then we opened it up for comments and questions and discussion with the group. And so when we opened it up, the first woman to speak said, "Oh, this is so fantastic. I just love all this you're talking about. It is so wonderful. I just love it. But you don't know my company. We could never do any of this in my company." And then somebody else immediately jumped in. "Oh, yes, we could never do this here." And on it went. It actually turned out to be a pretty amazing call. But I left the call frustrated. Not that I didn't have an answer for her, but that I didn't have a question for her to help her explore further. So as I often do when I'm a little stuck, I take my dogs and I go for a walk. And I live in the country, so we were out to walking. We were headed up this big hill, and I heard intuitively, "So what are 3 things that you know?" And I knew, just keep listening. It's all going to come. So the Deep Simple is 5 questions, and it's designed for, initially designed for those situations or circumstances in which it's so huge, you have no idea where to start. You have no idea where to begin. So choose something that's going on for you right now that you have no idea where to begin. Or maybe it's a situation with a client or with your own company or a company that you're working with. And maybe it's something that's happening in your country. And then whatever your topic is, what are 3 things that you know to be true about what's happening? Now notice it's not true with a capital T. This is not the big truth. This is just what's true for you right now. So maybe the first thing, maybe I'm really frustrated. Okay, that's one thing that's true for me. And maybe the second thing is I'm having a really, really hard time with my boss. Okay, that's the second thing that's true for me. Maybe the third thing is this team has to find a whole new way to talk to each other. Okay, that's the third thing. So what is it for you? 3 things that you know to be true about what's happening right now. True for you. Now, of those three things, which one holds the greatest power right now? Now, when I say which one holds the greatest power, it's like which one has hold of you the tightest? Notice the question is, which one do you want to talk about? The question is, which one holds the greatest power for us to work with right now? So of those three things you know to be true, which one has the biggest hold on you? Question number 3, with that thing that holds the power, what wants to shift there? There's a message that's trying to come through that there's something that it wants you to know. Something wants to shift. What is that? Let it show you or tell you. It's nothing to figure out. And so with that shift that wants to happen, who's that shift asking you to be? How's it asking you to show up? What role is it asking you to play? That shift that wants to happen. You don't have to know how. You don't have to know any details about it. You just need to recognize this is how it's asking me to show up right now. And then the last question, listen, sense, feel. Let the energy show you what is one step that you can take today to begin moving towards that shift. Now notice it's not moving towards resolution of everything being all worked out. It's simply one step that you can take right now to begin moving towards that shift that wants to happen. All we're looking for is a next step. That's it. And then in the next 24 hours, take that step and then go back to question number 1. And you go right through the cycle again. And you keep working in this way until at a certain point, a little further down the path will start to show itself. You'll begin to sense, oh, I think I see 2 steps ahead now. I think I'm beginning to sense what our next 3 steps might be. That's not going to happen probably from the beginning, but it will happen as you go along. The deep simple. Let's open up to everybody here. What do you discover with the deep simple? What's the power of that process itself? And then any question, anything you'd like to ask about what we've talked about today. It's a real sort of crash course here in what is transformational presence, but maybe gives you a little introduction of what we'll be exploring in April. So the floor is open. Anybody who would like to ask a question or share something about the deep simple?
Yeah, I made an observation. This is Gabriel. First of all, thank you very much, Alan, for this very beautiful presentation and quite revealing for me. Just doing the last exercise, the what did they call it? The deep simple. I noticed a struggle internally. Actually, it's a struggle of the mind wanting to find answers, and it kind of takes me off of my ability to just feel. And I'm a very, very mind-oriented person. I come from that corporate world, and so what I'm actually feeling is what now I'm realizing some of the leaders that I'm working with are always feeling and always apprehensive to actually start thinking from their hearts. So now I understand why there's this resistance to address a lot of the issues that they're facing from the heart and not necessarily from the intellect. because I am feeling it myself, because it's a constant nagging voice of, I got to find the answers. I got to resolve the issue. I got to figure this out. And based on what you said earlier, it's in the VUCA world, we don't necessarily need to find the answers.
In fact, it's a disservice to us when we try to find the answer too quickly, because then we're just going to be on the surface and treating a symptom. We won't actually be getting, the whole key here, again, with the Deep Simple, with the 3 questions, with every single tool that we use, the point is to cut through to the essence. It's like the tools are there to open the doors, to get us to talk about what it is we really need to be talking about, you know? And so beautiful, Gabriel, what you're saying. Thank you so much for your honesty about kind of what it brought to you here and the frustration that it brought for you, because this is an enormous paradigm shift for us in the business world and in really in the society world, you know, to be willing to step back and pause. We talk a lot in Transformational Presence about slowing down to the speed of presence and working with what does that mean to be moving no faster than I can be aware of everything that's happening inside me and outside of me, all around, all the people. I can be aware of everything that's there. And that what is the optimal speed for me moving in that place? We have a huge exercise that we do around that we'll probably do on that day in the full day workshop. And the point being that the more you slow down to the speed of presence, that gives a space for everything else to start speeding up. And that at first it feels like, my gosh, we don't have time for this. We can't slow down. You can't afford not to slow down. When you will step back and take just that brief moment for the reflection, taking in the bigger picture, all of a sudden many things start to get clear, and you begin to see, here's the path. Not the 10 steps, but here's 1 step, here's 2 steps. And something inside of you knows, and you know that feeling, Gabriel, and something inside of you knows, this is what I have to do. I know this is right. And so following that, thank you so much for sharing that. That's, to me, we talk about conscious leadership. This is one of the biggest parts of our work, is to help those that we serve find that place inside of themselves where they can start to trust that and are willing to work with that. This has been the huge shift that's happened I work mostly with the country CEOs and their deputies at IKEA, and what they're finding in their top leadership team in each country is, oh my gosh, when we work with some of these tools and just step back and listen, we're getting a whole other level of insight as to what's going on and how we address the big things that are happening in that company. So, yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you.
I just want to echo what Gabriel said. Alan, I've been doing my new work for 2 years. I still need to deprogram myself from the 30 years in corporate, because, you know, what I used to do is I had to force a lot of things to make things happen, or at least I thought I did. And my mantra every day is trust and allow. But I still realize when you were in the beginning, the first exercise, I need to embrace that more, silence and presence, and it will transform me. So when I do these webinars, I often think that I organize them for myself, and I think it was probably the case today again. I learned, probably the one who learned the most. Thank you, Alan.
Yes, and you know, Stefan, when you say, so it's been 2 years, and I will just say, for me, this is a lifelong journey.
Yeah.
This is because, again, it's what we said earlier with, I think it was Kim, that the air that we breathe is still all here.
Yeah.
And so we have to be so consciously making choices in every moment to stay connected here, because this is where the bigger intelligence is.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else?
I just wanted to say that what I really liked about this Deep Simple exercise, and that I think this supports what Gabriel was saying earlier, is that it really helps you to quite quickly, actually, like if you keep repeating the process over and over, you're going to get to the root cause of what the problem is pretty quickly. And once you know the why, you can figure out the how. And if you're able to do this with everybody and have everybody's input and participation, they'll get it and they'll see it. You know, I had there's a problem that I'm dealing with right now, or that I'm trying to help a group solve, and this group is trying to solve their problem, but they're operating from a space of fear and scarcity and insecurity, and they're not going to get the results that they want because they're focusing on what they don't have instead of focusing on what they want to have and how to make the most of what they have in the meantime.
So this is huge. Everything that you're saying, that you're disappeared now. But was that Irene? Was that your name? Oh, Valerie.
Valerie.
Yeah. So what was the whole point of, as long as we are trying to solve problems, we are stuck and we're going nowhere. So to turn that around from, instead of trying to solve a problem, treat that problem as your best friend. It has some information for you. It's trying to show you something and tell you something. Listen to that, and that problem only exists because it's trying to show you something new that wants to be created. Not about fixing the old thing. There's something new that's trying to emerge. That's our job, is to follow through with that and constantly moving into the next creation, the next iteration that is showing up.
Right.
Thank you for that.
Maybe we have time for one last question. It's your chance before the dog takes Alan's time.
Before the dog says we have to walk now.
Yeah. So I think it's the hour has passed. So I would like to thank everyone for coming and interacting and asking questions and answering Alan's question. And thank you, Alan, so much for the wisdom that you shared. I know it's a tiny, tiny sliver of all your wisdom, and we'll get to enjoy a bigger sliver when you come to Montreal. So we'll make sure it's a little bit warmer than it is now. And we can't wait to have you over in the early spring in Montreal. So
I look forward to being there. And please just visit my website, transformationalpresence.org, because there are lots of resources there, videos and many, 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 many blog posts that all are connected to this. So there's a lot there to support you.